Let me take you to a meeting room where I met with a father and a son together 3 years ago. The dad was tired. He was really interested and eager to find a way to transition the farm. He had worked both on farm and off farm for decades. His health wasn't great. The son had had his own path. He had left the farm for a number of years and lived in a few places, and had returned to the farm in his 30s. The son shared, every day, Dad says, we should just sell the farm. We should just have an auction. We should get out. And what I hear my dad say is, you can't do this. You're not good enough. I don't trust you. The dad called me a few days later and said, I had no idea what I was saying and the impact I was having, but now I know. Both members of this family were experiencing the outcomes of misinterpretation and miscommunication. Communication, it's one of the touchstones of farm families. The most successful ones communicate well and consistently. But if you don't have good communication, how can you change it? If you've never had good habits, where do you start? Or even if you do communicate well, but have a sense it could be better, what can you do? The best part of most Canadian farms is that you get to work with family. The biggest challenge of most Canadian farms is that you have to work with family. At FCC, one of our team's goals is to help families get unstuck in their transition frustrations. As part of that, we frequently witness communication breakdowns, which often falls on mom's shoulders as the peacemaker of the family. And there it causes stress. Farm women tend to try to keep the peace. They tend to try to keep things level, and it can be overwhelming at times. So I care very much to share some suggestions and reminders to help improve your farm family communication habits today and in the future. You can do this, so let's figure it out together. You might ask, why is this worth spending some time on? Well, there's some great evidence from research that's been conducted and from the tables that we sit at on a regular basis. When you communicate well, there's efficiencies that are found every day that not only save money, but they save relationships. Secondly, it allows each person involved in the farm team to have clarity, which allows for better focus, purpose, and rest as a result. And last but not least, if you are having regular, small discussions about the little things, the bigger issues come more easily and don't get left untouched or unspoken. Farm families certainly have a variety of communication styles. From our team's perspective, we encounter teams on farms that communicate a ton to those that are very tight-lipped. We also talk to families whose cup is full to overflowing every day, and those whose cup is not even half full. It seems to be half empty, or sometimes there's no water at all. So let's set the stage. Who's in this virtual room today, and what are their farm family communication habits like? You had a poll at the beginning, so let's show the results. We first asked, thinking about your farm team, either immediate family or the farm business team, how much does your team communicate? And the spectrum was from we communicate a lot to we communicate very little. Second poll, the results are regarding the tone of the communication. Is it generally positive, all the way to generally negative? More than anything, the message of these results is that in our experience, sitting down with families, there is a huge spectrum of styles of communication or lack thereof. There is no perfect practice. However good or bad your communication is, you are not alone. In our time together, I would like you to think about these suggestions and ideas and how they apply to your family. What can you use with your team on the farm in the coming months, in the coming years, to help you talk the talk in a productive way? The exact same message can be heard by multiple people with completely different results. Think about that father and son. The same words were being heard very differently. So we need to address both the giver and the receiver of the message, who play a big role in how that message gets interpreted. This phrase is a great example of a message that can be interpreted in many ways. Is it a question? Oh, you eat meat. A negative statement? Oh, you eat meat. A positive statement? Oh, you eat meat. Sarcastic? Oh, you eat meat? Encouraging? Oh, you eat meat. Just 4 words with many possible meanings. This vulnerability of misinterpretation should greatly impact our choice when thinking about which method you choose to communicate it. The message you want to send, should it be verbal or by text? Should it be written in an email, or do I really need to go and talk about this in person? A great example I had recently was with a farm woman that told me she had been referred to a lawyer that she wasn't familiar with, and she was very disappointed and did not like this woman because she was very short, she did not answer all of her questions, and she felt like she was kind of a nuisance. And I said, well, tell me more. Was there a issue in the phone call? Would this have been better in person? And she said, oh no, we've only communicated by email. She was reading into the messages that were being sent. And I asked her that. I said, is it possible that you might have misinterpreted? Yeah, I'm under a lot of stress right now. Think about what we're reading into messages and how our listener might be reading into those messages too. Too often, families end up with friction due to misunderstandings in terms of intentions and what's been said. So now that we're conscious that we want to be thoughtful about the way we're delivering a message, let's talk about how we listen. First, are you listening at all? Are you on your phone? Is your iPad on? Is the television on? We have a lot of screens that are demanding our time in a very addictive way, and we're not paying attention to each other the way that we used to. Are we experiencing frustration with each other and therefore not really hearing what they're saying? Is it coming in a disrespectful tone or a tone that we consider disrespectful, so we turn off the listening? Are we experiencing fear, anger? Are we annoyed? Have we answered this question like 15 times this week and they're not hearing us, so we're not going to listen either? Are we tired? We have a responsibility for showing up and truly listening and taking the time to focus. Are you listening with the intent to judge? You're preparing yourself. You think they don't know what they're talking about, they obviously don't understand, or they have bad intentions. Keep in mind, this isn't exactly our fault. We are wired to judge. At our very core self, it's a protective mechanism that we want to be interpreting and keeping ourselves protected by judging the message that's being delivered. But if we know that, we can consciously listen with compassion. We can choose to open the conversation and ask, what's really going on here? Help me understand. Is this what you're telling me? Rather than getting stuck in resistance. Another opportunity we have is to listen with curiosity. Think about listening as a child. Ask why. Be interested, be excited. Dig in deeper rather than just taking it at your first judgment or interpretation. I have personally learned this in recent months as I was making assumptions and guessing wrong at times. There was a time where I was trying to establish myself and learn about different relationships within FCC, and I was misinterpreting what was being said to me. And it was out of a desire to be accepted. And I recognized that I was kind of doing some negative self-talk and the narrative was really unhelpful. So I learned I need to ask more questions, because if I make assumptions, that's where the downfall is. So being more curious can certainly be helpful, and I highly encourage you to do it. I have come to appreciate that in the conversation around farm families, that the more I learn, the more I have to learn. There is so many different good ideas out there. And so I'm sure we can all learn from each other at this event. So I'm going to ask you to please go to the chat on the right-hand side of your screen and share the following. Based on your experience and what you have seen other people do, I'd like you to describe farm family communication at its best, the premier farm family communication. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What are some things you should always do? What are some things you should never do when you're communicating with farm team members? By sharing them in the chat, we can all benefit. These are not concepts that are necessarily foreign to us, but we forget about them in the day-to-day operations on farms. Looking at the suggestions, one that jumps out at me right away, regular team meetings with minutes. I'll talk about that a little more. It's a great idea and something that not many farms tend to accept as a really critical success factor. Using a respectful tone. Man, you know, when you say a message and you think about how it's heard, what did you mean by that? And what did you mean by that? Come across really differently, and we need to own that. Make communication a priority. I couldn't agree more. We can really dig into this and think about everybody on the team, asking them to intentionally communicate, to work to do better and help each other. There's so many good suggestions here. Please soak them up. I'm going to continue. Now that we've talked about good habits for delivering and receiving a message, and you've shared some best practices, I'm going to dig a little deeper into some specific practices that we have seen to be super effective when it comes to a farm family. This picture depicts that classic conflict. Two opposing sides. Another illustration that rings a bell with me is thinking about two sides of government. You know, they really have the government and the opposition. They really go head to head. It's textbook. It's what we envision. And somehow we transfer it to our family farm. And it really does damage. It seems that there has to be a winner and a loser. But think about it this way. Differing opinions can actually be a great source of creative strength and power in a business. Kathy Colby said it well. Discussing differences does not resolve them. It involves them. It turns a clash of wills into a meeting of the minds. So I'm going to challenge you to change your perspective. Instead of opposite sides of the table, think about your farm family all on one side of the table. You can still have disagreeing views or opposing views, but you're all aiming the same place. You all are aligned in where you're trying to accomplish and that vision that you're aiming for. And so by bringing them together in a focused goal, shared family interest results in people committed to compromise in order to get the job done. It becomes win-win. In fact, by discussing differences, you can let people do what they do best and allow that division of roles amongst the farm family. Again, discussing differences does not resolve them, but it involves them. It turns a clash of wills into a meeting of the minds. This picture gives me chills. It makes me almost feel nauseous when I think of that fight fight response, it's that amygdala hijack, right? They talk about fight, flight, or freeze. And so I want to challenge you, whichever your response is, whether you're the type to dig in and fight, which I've seen plenty of families that are like that, or you're more likely to freeze and just button up and not say anything, or you're likely to leave and avoid that confrontation. I just want you to recognize it. There's some physical symptoms that will tell you that this is happening to you, to your body. So your heart rate goes up, your temperature goes up, you begin to sweat, you have the urge to yell or the likelihood to clam up. I want you to just know that that is an unhelpful response. It's the most primitive response. That amygdala hijack is literally when your brain abandons ship. And the trick is to walk away. While it's important to establish that this point of conflict is an important issue that needs to be resolved, you need to say, I'm not in the best frame of mind to deal with it right now, and I need to go back, need to go and collect my thoughts and then come back. It's a great rule of engagement. You can give your farm family permission to do that, to say, wow, I need to step away, or wow, this isn't a great time to talk. We're going to come back. There's actually some research that says that you need at least 30 minutes to let all of those fight, flight, freeze hormones to settle down in your body. So do that. Give yourself permission to walk away and come back. I had one farm family that I met with in which the dad was super prone to blow-ups, and he was really quite casual about it. He said, yeah, that's just how I am. And I said, you know what? You have control over that, and only you. And you're doing damage by not managing that. So in our conversation, I kind of jokingly proposed to the parents and their farming son that perhaps they could keep track of it like a safety record at a manufacturing plant. So many days without an accident could be so many days without a blow up. Well, a number of days later, the farming son called me back and he said, Patty, 14 days. 14 days what? 14 days without a blow up. They had been keeping track, and it was really meaningful to recognize that this was something that everybody was celebrating. The one caution I would give is that the odds of that person not slipping back into that blow up is probably slim. So not to punish yourselves too bad for slipping back into poor communication habits, but instead say, okay, let's wipe the slate clean, talk about how we can avoid this happening again. It can really be a powerful thing, but certainly was impactful for that family. Too often, I sense that farm families are not trusting each other. There's a level of suspicion. Are you suspicious of your family members' approach, ideas, suggestions, motives, goals? A best practice is to assume best intention. I've already touched on this in terms of how we interpret things, but I really can't emphasize it enough. Ask each of your farm family members that to assume good intentions because you're all aiming for the same goal, and talk about that. If you have a hard time understanding what they're doing, go back to curiosity and ask them to explain why they're doing what they're doing, and help them for you to understand. Help them help you to understand. So another example, I had a farm family in which the son put auxiliary lighting on all of their farm equipment. So in addition to the lighting that was already there, like LED specialized lights to have really, really bright lighting. And the dad was really not impressed. He's like, you obviously don't understand the cash flow of a farm and you're wasting money like this. Why do you need to put bling on all of our equipment? And in our conversation, the son was finally able to explain that one of his challenges was that his night vision was not particularly good. And so these lights were permitting him to function at night during harvest in particular in an easier and safer manner. There was a really good intention, and that suspicion and judgment really did some damage, but can be cleaned up. Trust good intentions. It goes a long way. Last idea that I want to share is this graphic really depicts networking at its finest. You want to connect with as many people as possible. And in conferences or on online chat groups, that does make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, this also happens on family farms, and it's not optimal. When there's one-on-one conversations about critical farm decisions or long-term planning or speculation that are just between those two people but doesn't include the whole group, it really leaves an opportunity on the table. Families are not choosing to come together, to work together as a group, to come up with ideas, to deal with issues, to come up with a strategy for tasks at hand. It leads to challenges as people lack information, they miss opportunities, there's efficiencies that are lost as people double up on tasks that need to get done. There's also hurt feelings, and it's potentially dangerous if there's some safety thing that's compromised by not communicating. So what you can do about that is thinking about some best practices of coming together. Schedule farm family team meetings and conversations. Now, some families choose to do it at a boardroom at a hotel as a family getaway when that's within protocol, when that's reasonable in terms of safety. Some of them choose to do it on a tailgate. I've seen some in shops with a whiteboard. That's one of my favorites. If you are not only having a conversation, but recording what is happening, it really permits further advancement, and you can go back to your task list and have a look. You have a to-do list that can be built. Each person knows who's doing what, who's leading what. They can help each other, but there's a specific person who's the champion for that particular task. Everybody knows then that there'll be an opportunity to speak up. So if they're experiencing an issue, they know there's going to be a team meeting when they can voice that concern, as opposed to sitting on it, waiting for that position or opportunity to speak up. If there's no consistent platform, that's really difficult. As time goes on, your family can decide how frequent these meetings need to be. I've met with families in which one meeting a year is a huge leap. So start there if that's your story. I've also had families that were choosing to meet daily during their regular operating year, but when they got into their busy season, they chose to back off and have fewer meetings. It was then that they realized that that was when the meetings were so critical, because not only did they have a lot of tasks on the go and efficiency was really important, but they were also tired and needed to lean on each other to make sure there was good, clear communication and understanding of what needed to get done. As I said, this is worth spending time on because communicating intentionally and thoughtfully saves money and relationships. You can get things done more quickly and everybody's clear on what they're doing. That clarity allows them to be focused, to be really efficient, and to rest better as a result. And ultimately, if you're intentionally having these good conversations on a regular basis, the bigger discussions will come more easily and don't get left unsaid. This is an opportunity, no matter where your farm family is at, that you can go and take baby steps towards improving your farm family communication. I promise it's worth the investment, and please know that I'm encouraging you every step of the way. Now go talk the talk on purpose. Thank you.